Hello everybody, my name is Ellen from AMGC. Welcome to AMGC's webinar series, 10 Ways to Succeed in Australian Manufacturing. Today is focused on Way 4, Network and Collaborate. We will now pass you over to our host, Michael Sharp, our National Director of Industry.
Many thanks, Ellen, and welcome everybody. You might notice that I'm not in the car today, so coming to you from the home Zoom studio. And I'd like to kick off by acknowledging country. And in the spirit of reconciliation, the AMGC acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respect to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. And today at home, I'm coming to you from Darkinjung country. And I'd encourage you to have a look around at maybe where you're located today and recognise where you're placed in the Aboriginal Indigenous community. I'd like to show you that we've got the 10 Ways report here. It's available on the AMGC website, and there'll be a newsletter coming out with some further updates next week. So today we're talking about Way 4, which I'm quite excited about. It's networking and collaboration, and we've got some wonderful speakers. Today I'm joined by my colleague, Angela Doyle, our State Director for Western Australia, and Ange is coming to us from Perth, so welcome Ange.
Thank you.
And Phil West is with Siren Cameras, and Phil is in Brisbane today, and he's got a wonderful story to share shortly, and so welcome Phil.
Thank you very much.
And Penny Crawford is coming to us from regional New South Wales at Gunnedah. Very pleased to have you joining us today, Penny, and looking forward to hearing more about your latest works with the Crawford boots. Welcome.
Thank you.
Now, a bit of housekeeping to start. A reminder that this webinar is being recorded and you'll be able to watch it at later dates on our YouTube channel. That's being well received with the previous episodes. Remember to please submit any of your questions to the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen, and happy for questions at any time throughout, and I'll do my best to ask our panelists those questions that you submit. We're going to wrap up at 1 o'clock Sydney time, so 1 hour, and happy to take any questions after that too. If you want to reach out to any of us on LinkedIn or send us an email, happy to engage with you. Remember again, this report can be downloaded completely free on the AMGC website. Now, a bit about the report. I'd like to acknowledge our Director for Research, Katie O'Connell, who many of you did meet at the various roundtables and discussions we had all over Australia. We had more than 30 focus groups and roundtable discussions and interviews, 93 individuals from manufacturing companies, a range of industry bodies, government agencies, and universities. These industry bodies represent approximately 370 manufacturers right across the country. We did a survey of 1,000 members of the Australian public and a survey of 1,000 students in focus groups. Now, just a glance of the report that we're touching on today, the Way 4, Network and Collaboration. We found that collaboration can make firms more profitable and innovative by sharing ideas, discovering opportunities and spreading the risk. Companies can reap these benefits by mining their own personal networks, seeking out established network programs, and putting aside zero-sum thinking. Industry associations and forums, government offer a range of networking opportunities, and firms should promote their willingness to collaborate, especially with the universities I've found. There's some great opportunities there. Now, one of the facts that I'd like to mention here is that every manufacturer that AMGC consulted wanted to talk and collaborate more with others in the industry. So we all want to do more collaboration. I think that's a good sign. But now I'd like to have a brief introduction from a couple of our panelists. So Penny, Crawford Boots is going from strength to strength. I've been following your work on Instagram, which is terrific. So I'd encourage all of you out there to have a look at Crawford Boots and see the products that Penny's creating. Your boot has been described as the Nike of the gumboot industry. And I think that's fairly apt, because when I was with you last, I was able to try a pair of the Crawford boots on, and I must say they're one of the most comfortable pair of boots I've ever worn. So can you tell us a bit about the journey to get to this point, Penny?
Okay, thank you, Michael, for that introduction and that plug. Welcome from the land of Gamilaroi people in Gunnedah, northwest New South Wales. My name's Penny Crawford. I'm the founder of a product called Crawford Boot, which has been designed by myself, a podiatrist, and it was designed to offer a footwear solution that addressed many of the fitting, comfort and safety issues associated with the gumboots currently available. We've built a distribution network across about 6 states in Australia, mainly in underground mining, but we're always looking for industries that see improved risk management, value for money and wearer satisfaction as a priority. Crawford boots are an example of a narrow range or a narrow product with a national footprint, and this has only been achieved through building networks and collaboration. So I see this has resulted in the past and the present success of my product, and using this same methodology of collaborating and working my networks and building those important network relationships, I'm sure it will ensure that there's future growth and success in my company.
No, that's great. Thanks for joining us today, Penny. And Phil, Siren Cameras, a great bit of technology, and very pleased to have Siren as a participant in the AMGC project. So we're looking forward to some outcomes with that project that's now underway. You grew up in the northeast of Scotland, and obviously you're a keen fisherman. Now, Penny's a podiatrist by profession, but I imagine you're not a professional fisherman. So you might tell us a bit about how you got to this point with Siren Cameras.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. No, unfortunately, I'm not a professional fisherman, as much as I would love to be one. That's absolutely my passion, but my day job is in the energy industry, where I project manage. So, but that aside, I guess my passion for fishing has really kind of stayed with me for life and up until this point, and drove me to effectively develop the startup that I'm a director of, and that's Siren Cameras. And what we're doing is introducing the world's first double lens fishing camera to the recreational fishing market. The camera itself can be clipped onto the line as soon as a fish is actually hooked up, so it's unintrusive until you have a fish on the line. The camera goes onto the line, it slides down the line, landing on the surface. It sits stably because of the way it's been designed, shooting back at the angler and shooting down at the fish being retrieved towards it. So we're the only company in the world that can kind of document that entire user experience, if you like, for the recreational angler out there. And then finally, the camera is smart enough to understand where it is in the world. So its GPS location, the water temperature, the date and the time of usage. And so allowing the angler to log the fish species against that data provides big data. And our ambition for the startup is to unlock that bottleneck between recreational fishing communities and conservation groups that are desperate for that information.
Can it help me to find a fish, Phil?
Going forward, maybe I might even share some of that data with you, Sharpie, if you're really struggling for.
I need all the help I can get, I can assure you. So networking must be important to the work you're doing as a startup company, and I imagine outside of Australia too. So global collaboration and networking opportunities would be key, right?
Yeah, massively. And I should have said there at the intro, you know, as my profession as a project manager, it absolutely isn't in the manufacture or tech space. So the potential of the startup is really enabled through, you know, putting a lot of effort into networking and collaboration. It's from that fundamentally that we've been able to assemble a team and a skill set capable of actually producing our product.
So one of the research findings in today's episode found that we need to build new networks by reaching out to other manufacturers. So I guess starting from a point of not even being a manufacturer, that's vitally important. So congratulations on your efforts so far, and certainly looking forward to more updates from the project as we make progress, which is just fantastic.
Yeah. We started from ground zero in terms of knowledge in this space. We're in a very good position now, and I should say as well, just thank you again for and show my appreciation for the support of the AMGC, and we're looking forward to extracting maximum value from your support.
Yeah. Now, it's great to have Ange here with us from Perth, and you've got some great insights you're going to share with us very shortly. But I thought what I might do is bring up the poll. Ellen, if you don't mind bringing the poll up on the screen, I'd like to ask all of you out there this poll question, which will get us started around what percentage of Australian manufacturers currently collaborate with other firms? Do you think it's 23%? Now, all these numbers are low, aren't they? Do you think it's 16%? Or 12%? What percentage of Australian manufacturers currently collaborate with other firms? Plug in your answer there and we'll get the response. And I think, Ange, you're going to share some great insights around how we can do so much better.
Thanks, Sharpie. One of the things I've noticed when we're talking about networking and collaboration is there's no real sort of firm definition. What do they mean? So I thought I'd share with the group something I came across recently, developed by Carolyn Hofmeister, which I think is a lovely way of looking at it. I'm sure it's not the only way, but I think it's quite useful.
It looks good on the screen, Ange. That's great. I think we'll get an answer here. Ellen, do we have a final response there?
Oh, sorry, Michael.
No, all good. So the majority of you think that the percentage of Australian manufacturers currently collaborating is only 12%. And you would be correct. So it's a very low number, which means we have a fantastic opportunity to do more, to reach out to each other, seek advice, learn from each other, and drive manufacturing. And Ange, this presentation looks pretty cool, so please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Sharpie. Yeah, so, what does it mean, networking, coordinating, cooperating, collaboration? And as you can see, there's a sort of a sliding scale of what those things can mean. So networking might be you go to an event, you exchange business cards, a little bit about yourself and your company. You're just exchanging information. And I think most of us don't particularly enjoy that sort of thing. It can feel quite, superficial. So we encourage people to move along that scale. Maybe eventually you could coordinate with each other, so organise, synchronise or sequence activities together. It might be you can cooperate. So in Western Australia, for example, there's a group called EMICOL, which is the Engineering and Manufacturing Industry Cooperative run by John Morris. And they're a bunch of engineering manufacturing companies. They cooperate together. They might share work on tenders or share employees for a big job or things like that. But collaboration is all those things which lead to enhancing each of your capacities and success. So it's a win-win for all those involved.
Oh, that's very good. And obviously you'll be able to look at this on the video later, but we'll also share this information on the members page. So all this information will be available to you, which is great. We've already got our first question, so please keep the questions coming and I'll ask our panelists. I might start with you, Phil. We've got a question here from Chris around IP. So how can companies collaborate without companies stealing their crucial business IP? Do you have any experience around that?
Yes, and I'm going to talk from a startup perspective, okay? And I would say that, maybe this doesn't apply to everybody, particularly within manufacturing, which I don't have too much knowledge of at this point, but for startups and for, ideas, if you like, I started on my journey being very protective of my idea and thinking that, I don't want anybody to steal the idea. And over the years, it's really dawned on me that ideas are almost valueless until they're actually executed properly. So I would encourage, from my experience, that you don't let that hinder you. Of course, you've got to be careful with that. And also at the same time, if you have some IP that is valuable enough and innovative enough to actually protect, then just by commencing the actual process of protecting that, then you're by default protected. You're patent pending, if you like. So I would urge people to really have a good think about the value of networking and collaboration and almost sharing your ideas versus not doing that. Because, from our experience, we've got to where we are now by actually being open and transparent, and really injecting energy into that collaboration space, while at the same time in parallel running our IP protection. So yeah, I'd round off my kind of guidance, if you like, on that with ideas and IP. Isn't as valuable as you think unless you're going to go ahead and execute it, and sometimes you can't do that without collaboration.
No, good point. And Penny, you've got some IP around the boots, of course, and people can have a look at the Crawford Boots website to see some diagrams around the technology. It's some good information there. But have you had any experience around the question?
Yes, I have, and I agree with Phil. It's quite daunting at first because you have this idea, you don't want someone to steal it. Who do you go and talk to? How do you protect it? I found the easiest way for me to start was with an NDA, which is pretty standard, and then most of the people or companies I talked with were happy to sign that NDA, and that's a simple way of just protecting that idea. But again, I agree with Phil. You have to move forward, and I agree. Ideas can be worth nothing unless everyone has an idea, but are you going to develop and are you going to design? Are you going to move it further forward? I have IP protection. I have trademarks. I have design registrations, and I have patents that have been granted in Australia, New Zealand, Malaysia, and just Europe, which is pretty exciting. It's a long path. I would seek professional advice, and my first step would be the NDA and seeking out an IP strategist, because they're very good at looking at your idea. Is it worth pursuing in a patent? Is it worth pursuing as a registration of a design, or is it worth pursuing simply as a trademark? That would be my first step, because it's a very expensive process and it's a worthwhile one. But also, what's your long-term goal? Are you wanting to license your product in terms of IP? You then need protection. So start with an NDA, pretty simple, happy to share mine. And also happy to share some contacts in terms of very good IP strategists who often give you their time for the first appointment free. So worthwhile, and get a bit of a strategy going.
And I guess we're doing a bit of it all here today, aren't we? Sharing our experience and our knowledge, and in an open forum. So great to have so many people here today involved. So feel free to reach out to any of us on LinkedIn, as I said earlier. We're all happy to engage with you. Phil, a couple of the findings that we have in the report is around visiting trade and exhibition shows. And we all know that's very difficult right now. This report was compiled over the last 18 months from all the research, engaged with manufacturers all over the country, which led to these outcomes. But how do you cope with trade and exhibition shows in the time of COVID-19?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. We went ahead and bit the bullet. It's a good segue actually from the last point that was just being made there. Once our IP was in the process of being granted, we bit the bullet and in 2019 went to a few expos and demoed our Siren camera to some great success. We would have liked to do the same this year, but of course, it's impossible. Hence why we're all sitting in home offices right now. But similarly to I think the entire world, we've been accelerated probably about a decade within 6 months in terms of this whole virtual arrangement. And some of these expos are professional enough as well to actually hold virtual exhibitions. So we've been able to still take part in those. And although I would say maybe not quite as effective as actually being there physically, it's certainly not a showstopper to continue collaboration and networking. And then maybe on top of that, a big part of our, I guess, funnel of communication, if you like, is on social media. And that takes no physical interaction as well. That's not hindered our ability, if you like, to connect with our potential future consumers at all.
We've all got better at social media and all the rest, you know. So, I mean, who had heard of Zoom up until the crisis? And, you know, we've heard it said before that we've seen probably 5 years worth of innovation in the last 5 months. So I think that's fairly accurate. So, yeah, I agree with you. We've got to get out there in every way. And I guess we're also, you know, we're all in the same boat. And if we're in a boat, we should be doing more fishing, right?
I've got a feeling the puns are going to come right throughout this hour.
Now, I've got plenty of questions coming through. Keep them coming. This one's from Colin at Flinders University. And he says that Flinders is working with the local Marion Council to assist local manufacturers to source from each other. So how can we convince the manufacturers that we can increase the size of the pie rather than just increase the fighting over it? Now, Penny, I know that you've been registering with the Industry Capability Network, and another key finding of our report today is registering on online portals and showing capabilities. What's your experience around that?
Thanks, Michael. That's a great question. Not.
Did you find it easy to engage with ICN?
Yes, I did. Yeah, no, and I think, you know, going back to COVID, my whole business strategy was going to mine sites, going to sites, visiting with my end users, going to expos. That was all my marketing. So I've been forced into social media, but also been forced to rethink what do I do for the future. And that has made me look towards my manufacturing and not being reliant on overseas manufacturers, not being reliant on the fluctuating dollar situation. So it's enabled me to tap into other like AMGC, ICN, all different sorts of industries and opportunities. So COVID's been difficult, but it's also been valuable because it's made you rethink strategies and different ways forward. Yeah.
And Ange, you've been hosting events and helping manufacturers come together in Perth throughout this year. So the last event, I believe you had quite a good roll-up, which was good to see on LinkedIn. You had some great posts there. But how have you found manufacturers wanting to come together and support each other during these times?
It's been really interesting. So I'm in Western Australia, so we're very fortunate. We could have face-to-face events, and we made this event particularly focus on having times for people to network and build relationships. And I challenged people a little bit at the event about, you know, what collaboration means. It's not zero-sum thinking where if you win, I lose, if I win, you lose, you know, that sort of thing. And what came out of that was some people were a bit, I guess, affronted by it and discussed it later, and they realised that actually, yeah, they were thinking a bit like that. And one of the people in that group shared their story about some collaboration they're doing, and it's come through an introduction by AMGC. So there was a company that has Internet of Things, IoT devices, and they've been working in the corporate world, but not in the SME manufacturing space, and they wanted to know more about that, but no idea where do you start. And then there's another company that's been dying to try IoT, but, you know, a bit wary, like who do I contact? How do I find out if they're going to sell me, you know, an albatross sort of thing? So through that introduction, which comes through networking, those two companies are now collaborating very well. And they're a great example of where we are all winners. So this IoT company is a winner. They're learning so much about manufacturing in the SME space. The SME is learning so much about IoT, and just the benefits are going to be huge. And AMGC is actually going to be beneficial. It's going to benefit us because later on we'll be able to say who those companies are, because we're going to hold an event so we can showcase what this looks like. Yeah. So I think having case studies where you can show where this has been beneficial is good. But I think the element that perhaps has not been spoken about through this morning is this all happens because relationships have been built. And the most important word in all of this is trust. And trust doesn't happen overnight. It's not through superficial relationships. It comes through, you know, long-term development of relationships, which is something we see a lot of, which is fantastic.
Yeah, and I think, you know, there's a couple of questions here about how do you collaborate, and I'll get to them, but I guess it's probably a good time to raise the report. And we've been able to feature a good mate of mine, Rod Murphy, his company in Newcastle, R&R Murphy. Have a look at the report. Unfortunately, Rod passed away at the start of this year, which was quite a shock to all of us. But last year, Rod was coming out to quite a few of our events. He travelled with me to North Queensland and spoke at Cairns and shared his experience of growing his engineering business. He spoke at our event, our space industry event that we held at Sydney. And we laughed and joked about that because there were so many people lining up to talk to Rod, because he shared all about how he's been able to grow his business and what it took to collaborate and get out there and network. And I joked with him. I said, mate, next time we're going to need to sell tickets to come and see Rod Murphy. So he always raved about bringing people together and getting amongst it. So at that point, he was engaging with the universities. And I think this is one of the strong points that you can look at in your business, is engage with the universities wherever they might be. It doesn't have to be your local university. We have a great network of researchers all over the country, some of the leading researchers in the world right here in Australia. So that's a fantastic opportunity. So a couple of our questions here are, how many businesses would be interested in getting involved in virtual trade shows? So I guess we could talk a bit about that. Another question, how do you find someone to collaborate when it's like cold calling? So cold calling, people do get, apprehensive about that, of course. But it goes on to say, no matter how good the product or ideas are, how do you get involved? How do you do that? And the last question is, what criteria are considered for potential collaboration partners? How do you find a collaboration partner, I guess, is the question there. Keep these questions coming. They're all good. But I refer back to what I said about Rod Murphy, where he was engaging with a couple of the universities, and what that enabled him was to find new manufacturing partners. He was looking to get involved with the space industry, and I'm grateful that we had those talks, but his business is continuing to grow, and even this year has put on more staff. So the company's growing by engaging and looking at things like the defence sector, the space industry, and manufacturing there. But about the cold calling, I guess, Penny, that's not always easy to just pick up the phone. What's your experience around finding the right collaborative partner? How do you do that?
Look, I agree totally with Ange. I think that slide and trust, it's about building trust. So it's cold call is fine, but you have to know who your ideal client is. You have to understand them, and the beauty of my product, or I suppose with my product, I developed it because I saw there was a need and I understood my ideal client and their pain points. So I had that initial conversation with them, and then I built that collaborative partnership with them through working with them. It's not hard. Like, I'm definitely no expert at this, but if you've got that trust, build that relationship, often what then happens is there is industry acknowledgement or benefit seen from your product or your idea, and they 9 times out of 10 will offer you an introduction. So your network then becomes bigger and wider. The cold calls are hard. Walking into those rooms by yourself are really hard, especially with a box of boots under your arm and you're known as the crazy gumboot lady. But you have to do that if you want to succeed. That's just part of it. There's nothing better than the old-fashioned pick up the phone and ring somebody.
Yeah, and Ange, one of the events I was able to join you was at the University of Western Australia, and that was a full house, which was terrific. But the tour to see the facilities there around the university and some of the work that those professors were working on was outstanding. But the ability to bring manufacturers together and introduce them to the researchers, open up that potential is pretty cool, don't you think?
I do. And one of the things I notice here, and I'm sure it's nationwide, is that quite often people don't know who else is around in their particular geographical area. They don't know who has expertise in something that they're looking for. And that's where those sideline chats that happen when you are at a networking event, that's where you find the gold, which you can then dig up through building those relationships. And that's not just with other manufacturers, as you say, it's with research organisations. And it may not even be a manufacturer, it might be an industrial designer or an IP expert, or things like that. I see there's a lot of questions coming up about IP. And yes, you do have to be very, very careful with it. And make sure that as you're building those relationships with people you do meet at networking events, you don't just jump in there and then. You check out, have they got the same values as you, the same high level goals as you? And a lot of that can come through just chatting alongside people at these events.
I would certainly encourage all of you out there to look at the universities. Feel free to reach out to me or Ange and we can make introductions. But you find that these researchers are putting programs together and they're looking for industry partners. And then through that, you can become part of a research project, which is then naturally a collaborative project. You're going to meet other manufacturers, help build your own local supply chains and potentially grow the business. That's what we've seen in action. That's what's happening right now. But Phil, back to the cold calls, if you don't mind. I mean, you guys are still in startup mode. That's all hands on deck, right? But how do you go about the cold calls and what's your experience?
Yeah, I love what Penny said there as well. I totally agree. Sometimes you just got to do it, right? And you know, that might be in different forms of like physically cold calling, but you know, maybe just be take yourself to events or make intros that are hard to do. It can be against our nature to do that. What I've found, I think would add to the conversation as well, is that collaboration and building that network, there can be often no immediate like value return that you see on putting the effort in. But from my experience, the real value and AMGC outcome is one of them. It hasn't came from a direct, there's an opportunity, let's go and you know, make an intro to that opportunity. It actually came in a roundabout way where, you know, not effectively like cold calling, but certainly taking ourselves to events that we knew nobody in a roundabout way, that value came back, and not immediately, but over time. And I feel like networking, if you can bring the enthusiasm and you know your product better than anyone else, so there should be no intimidation there to share what your product's all about. And as that network kind of develops, it goes exponential to a degree. And the people that you've spoken about with your product then talk to somebody else. And then before you know it, the dots join and some opportunity can arise from that. So although it can feel intimidating and quite difficult to cold call, yeah, get out there and do it, because 1 in 10 or 1 in 100 will actually, you know, you'll get a foothold and something really valuable could happen there.
Now, it's one thing to do the cold calls, but as far as a follow-up or as part of that cold call, how important do you think social media is on these things? Penny, you're doing some great work on Instagram. The website, of course, is informative, but don't you think that social media plays a role here in being able to direct people to have a look at what you're doing?
Without a doubt. And I am a bit of a dinosaur when it comes to social media. So it was a big hesitancy for me to enter into that social media realm, but you have to, and it's been really worthwhile. It's a great way of establishing an even broader network and gathering followers. And that's what you want with a product. You want to have a whole band of followers and a whole band of converted followers. So I've found it's been particularly beneficial, but I'm really only probably 2 months into the social media marketing exercise. So probably not the best person to talk about.
Oh, I think it's a great opportunity, and following how that is growing for you. You are attracting followers. You've obviously got a great product that people want to engage with. So I just think it is a key driver, of course.
I think it is too. Sorry, can I just quickly say one other thing? I think it's really important too that as a product, you recognise other products, and you we tend to have a bit of a competitive nature, or I don't, you know, you don't slander other products, you endorse and be happy to reward other people's successes. I think that's a big thing.
We'll hear some collaboration today, right? Now, you hadn't met Phil until an hour ago, but I'm sure that this gumboots would work in the fishing world. So who knows, there might be a collaboration effort.
Absolutely.
Here. So here it is happening. I'm going to refer back to the 10 Ways report. Again, you can download it on the AMGC website. But this is another key finding, and I'm glad that Steve Atherton is joining us today from Southern Strength in Sydney. But one of the key findings is about joining industry groups. Now, we all know the Chambers of Commerce and the various groups in your own community. Southern Strength just this week have built a new chapter in Western Sydney, and they had a terrific roll-up, which I'm very pleased about. And so collaboration is a key driver. You've got organisations like the Geelong Manufacturing Council and HunterNet in Newcastle. So I think it's a key driver to get engaged with those local industry associations. Look to your chambers of commerce. Ange, you've been hosting events with the WA Chamber, and they're always well received. So I'd certainly encourage you to look out for those networks. If you're not aware of some in your state, feel free to reach out to us again and we can make those introductions. But they're growing because people can share about what's happening in their business today, ask questions of other like-minded people, and look how they can grow their business. So I certainly recommend that as an opportunity. Don't you think, Ange?
Yeah. There's lots of industry groups certainly over here. Some of them are private, like there's some syndicate groups for business, like-minded business owners, the EMACOL that I mentioned, Chamber of Commerce and Industry WA. There's also, professional associations. But of course, like with the AMGC events that we will have here, we try and make the networking and collaboration an integral part of those events so that people have time to sort of chew the fat with other people.
Yeah. And I would always point people to the Manufacturing Academy. So if you haven't been on board there yet, check out manufacturingacademy.org.au and you'll see a whole range of manufacturers from companies big and small right across Australia that we were able to capture their thoughts, and you can hear them speaking about how they're transforming their business today. So I encourage you to look at that site. Some more questions here, keep them coming. Phil, this one's for you. By collaborating, were you able to identify improvements or opportunities for your product that you may not have considered or weren't aware of being a possibility? Did you adopt these suggestions? So did you adopt the suggestions, and will your business or product be better for it? So did collaboration help?
Yeah. I think it's a loaded question because maybe I haven't possibly explained how well this turned out for us due to the effort put into collaboration. But the value proposition of the product was the visual aspect, that perspectives that nobody else can provide, and that was like full stop. That was really it. Through collaboration, through talking with people that are very skilled in particular manufacturing and app development areas, the whole idea about data gathering started to gain a little bit of momentum. And indeed now that is arguably the more valuable value proposition of the startup. We think that consumers will buy it for their own video content desires, but that big data aspect wasn't in the game plan to begin with. It wasn't in my mind. It was only through effectively the network that we built and the momentum we built behind this product that was born.
Oh, very good. Now, this one's from Emil, and I'm going to point this to you, Penny, because it's around IP again, which we touched on before. But Emil's asking that he's heard of horror stories of ideas that have been leaked to buyers during the IP registration process. So before it's even approved, so during the registration process. And Ellen, you've deleted that question. I can't see the end of it now. But the question was around the IP registration and leaks prior to that even being registered. The question was, have you heard any stories around that? Do you have any experience around that? And you mentioned earlier about an IP strategy. How important do you think those sort of things are?
I think IP strategy is absolutely essential. And I agree with Phil in terms of collaborating with industrial designers or other people, because you start with an idea and often your design is nothing, is 100 miles away from that original idea because of the result of collaborating with people who are experts. I'm a podiatrist. I knew nothing about building or designing a boot. So I used a really good industrial designer who worked with me. And that's when you start going, and is your design manufacturable? So then you have to, deal with that. So you need experts. But in terms of IP, no horror story on my part. I suppose the NDA was very protective. A decent IP attorney, everything is protected. I think IP strategy is really, really important because you can spend a lot of time and a lot of money pursuing the wrong IP protection. So you need to, I think that would be my first port of call. And as I said, I've got some great people that I've worked with, and I'm more than happy to share their details.
Great. Well, fire those emails away to us and we can make those connections, or feel free to reach out to Penny directly on LinkedIn. This is the world we're in today. Another one of our findings, and Ange, I know you've been doing a lot of this work as far as connecting our members to defence opportunities and opportunities in the space industry as well. But another finding in our report is meeting with larger suppliers. And so going out to meet with some of the defence primes, or maybe a larger manufacturer in your own sector. If you're a food producer, could you meet with a larger manufacturer in the same game and see if you could become part of that local supply chain? I think that's really important to, again, reach out to people with like-minded opportunities and just go and talk to them, right?
Yeah, the main primes in Western Australia are mining, oil and gas companies.
Mm-hmm.
They're actually very hard to get into. You often get confronted with the procurement officer and not the engineer who's going to understand the value of what you're doing. So you've got to find ways to circumnavigate the KPI price-led procurement officer and get in touch with the chief engineer or someone in that capacity who can understand the value of what you're doing. And once again, that's where those warm introductions through someone else that can help you reach those people is just so important. Yeah. And sometimes that's at networking events, or it might be they might contact us directly. A lot of the networking that I've seen where it works really well is not even necessarily through cold calls, but warm calls where someone has looked out for someone else and said, look, I think what you're doing is great. Let me introduce you to Freddie, Mary, whoever it is. Mm-hmm. And I have found that sort of strategy getting into the primes, whether it's defence, space, mining, oil and gas, any of those sort of things, that's where I've seen it most successful. So if you're a bit uncomfortable with cold calling, I know I am, that's where having those relationships with other people who understand your value, where they can speak up for you and introduce you, that's where I've seen most success getting into those bigger companies.
Yeah. So feel free to reach out to Ange and she can help make those connections in Western Australia and further afield as well. We're regularly in touch, and there's certainly a lot going on right now because the whole world seems to be talking about manufacturing, which is just terrific. Right. Phil, we talked about, further to reaching out locally. What about global supply chains? What's your experience in reaching out, outside of Australia, and how do you go about that?
Yeah, I'm kind of covering ground we've maybe already touched on, but social media for us and expos as well have been incredible. We are looking at the US as our primary market, followed closely by Europe, and then it's Australia / New Zealand. But collaboration, if you like, or reaching out in exactly the same way as we do to potential stakeholders and consumers in Australia. Doing that in the US market using the same model has proved just as successful, if not more successful, in terms of the reaction we've got from that market. It's one, we really believe in the product, and we're able to demonstrate the visuals that it captures. So the sell to the particular person can be relatively easy. But from the US now, we've got some cracking leads waiting for the product to be ready. Those include numerous distribution chains and also advertisement agencies as well. The number one agency being the guys that launched the Yeti cooler across the US. So we're really excited that bases are loaded. It's all about just enabling the product now, and we've got high hopes that we can really do a job there in the US, and that's came from effectively the same networking model we've used in Australia.
Yeah, very good. Remembering that at the start I said one of the key findings from our research, and remembering this is real world research, it's been a privilege of mine to visit the factory floors all over the country and talk with manufacturers about how they're growing their business. But one of the key findings of today's report is that collaborating can actually be profitable. So we know that it's important, but we also know that only 12% of manufacturers are doing it. So what a great opportunity to grab with both hands. So we're hearing our speakers talking about that exactly today. We've got some more questions. Again, I'm going to throw this IP to you, Penny, to start with, because the question is, are patents necessary? In regards to IP protection, are patents necessary when collaborating?
Oh gosh, 8 years into my journey, are patents necessary? Yes, well, that is a good question. For me, my strategy was about protecting my idea, and my long-term strategy was possibly about licensing my product. So in terms to do that, I needed to have something to license, which was a patent. So it was protecting my product from being copied, because it's, you know, I haven't invented the wheel, but I've made a boot fit, and I didn't want that to be replicated or copied. So to me, a patent was very important, but once you start, there is a time frame involved, and you need to understand that. You have to have an idea of, do you just want it to be in Australia? Do you want it to be international? You just got to understand the process, and a good IP attorney will help you with that.
Yeah. In our last episode, Ange shared some of the books that she's been reading over the time about people growing their business and experience around leadership. So that was great. Thank you for that, Ange. And Phil, I wanted to ask you a similar question. You know, is there a podcast that you go to regularly? Do you have a book that you lean on, and you know, someone that you look up to? You know, as a startup company and not a professional fisherman, you know, how do you go about learning how to grow the business?
Yeah, good one. Well, to begin with, there's certainly enough content out there. I think the whole startup thing seems to have become really kind of cool over the last few years, and there's lots of people providing that inspiration, that guidance, that advice. I've found like there's so much conflict in the advice as well, that you've kind of got to follow your own compass to a degree. So much conflicting advice
Sure.
that you've got to make your own calls at the end. But my approach to it is to absorb as much advice as you possibly can to educate the decisions that will be in front of you.
Yeah. Well, we've got a question. We've got a question here, Phil, which says the report mentions the importance of peers, and who are your peers and why? And I think just being part of the AMGC project, you're developing a network there through the project and the collaboration that's going to bring. But any peers that you can ring or get involved with?
Yeah, I think there's numerous now, and I should say that the peers that I'm thinking about didn't exist in my life 3 years ago, because I just wasn't in this space. So it goes back again to really where we're at now, which isn't a finalized product, but it's certainly got the potential to be there quite soon. But the place we're at and the people that I'm able to call on, so peers, it's kind of underwritten, if you like. They're there because of the effort that's went into networking. So I feel that yes, I've got multiple people I can reach out to. Just an FYI, and it works for me, but you know, it might not work for everybody. I effectively have a very small mailing list that I personally keep up to date with where we're at monthly on the project, and that's a list of people that I really value their opinion on, and feel that in some way down the line they could have involvement or help support my business. So I don't get anything back from that immediately, but it helps me, one, frame up how the month went so I can get some enthusiasm back from the things that we've achieved, and also it keeps that close network of people very close to me. Yeah,
and I think this is the importance of member networks as well. Steve is sharing with me here on the screen how member firms benefit from working with each other and sharing their knowledge and skills sharing as well. So supporting each other's businesses as we move forward, and that those companies through the research necessarily develop more IP because they support each other, they can encourage each other and show the pathways, a bit about what we're talking today. So I certainly agree with Steve, what he's saying there. But it's another question we have, which is, has anyone on the panel had any pitfalls from collaborating? Are there any war stories? Ange, have you heard anything over in the West about any horror stories around collaborating? And maybe some people thought that they wouldn't do it again, but I guess we would always encourage them and help make introductions to firms that can help them drive their growth, right?
Yeah, so mostly, fortunately, where I've seen collaboration happen, a bit like Phil's story, what they thought was the value at the start ended up being something else because of collaboration they've had. So most have been very successful stories. Where I've seen the collaboration go wrong is where there's been a misunderstanding about what the end goal is and who is to do what, and perhaps a non-alignment of goals and values between the 2 or 3 organisations. So one company thought they were going this way, but the other company thought they were going that way, and they started diverging paths, and it became, it's become a bit dysfunctional. Mm-hmm. So once again, that goes back to that, get that relationship right first, and then have a really robust relationship where you can really nut out, who's doing what, what's the goal, how are you going to protect your IP, what happens if you break that trust, all those sorts of things. So it's a bit like getting married, really, isn't it?
Well, these are the things, Phil. There's always going to be pitfalls. We all make mistakes. What's your experience around? I guess you've got to get on the horse and go again, right? Never stop learning and never stop growing.
Absolutely, yeah. Within our startup, yeah, we've hit roadblocks. We've had, issues with there being multiple, I guess, companies involved with the development of it. Those interfaces can be hard to manage. But the net result also is that we wouldn't be where we're at without that. So, you could have like minor turmoil, but the overall result is you're making progress. It's important to keep that perspective. I found small knockbacks can be hard to take, but the ability to be resilient and kind of step back and look at the bigger picture is really important there. And maybe that goes for, maybe you could expand that opinion across even like Australian manufacturing, where I've found in my intro to it that it's like hyper competitive and working in silos to a degree. And so maybe that goes towards, the whole ambition about getting reshoring manufacturing, and maybe a fast track way to that is by taking a more collaborative approach here within the country.
Yeah, I agree. And I talked earlier about the universities and the opportunity there. Perhaps some companies have had a not so good experience with their local university. I would always encourage people to get out there and try again. We're all humans at the end of the day, and maybe you didn't click with the local researcher. Find someone else. Go again. Not every university is the same. The researchers have some great projects going on all over the country. And I know that Ange and myself, we're connecting members to some great university research, even right now. So if you're looking for support out there, feel free to reach out. But Penny, you've been looking at new opportunities in the circular economy, and I know you're engaging with one of the universities at the moment. So it's an ongoing learning experience, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. I'm so fortunate to have that introduction, and that came through originally being involved with the UNE, SRI, having the introduction then to you, Michael, who then did the, so it does go round full circle. But back to your other comment with collaboration, I think that you do need to pick yourself up and dust yourself off. You're going to have some roadblocks, some big roadblocks. You need to be resilient. Go with your gut. Trust what your gut's telling you, and agree with Ange. You do need to have the same agenda and follow that same agenda and have an understanding of what each party is supposed to do or is going to do. Keep touching base, keep touching base, keep touching base.
Yeah, get up and go again, because that's the way we all grow. I certainly agree with that. And again, we're happy to make any connections, and Penny's right. It's, never know where that next connection is going to come from, but you've got to latch on and be engaged. And the enthusiasm is out there. I know that because I'm hearing and seeing that every day. So certainly encourage more of that. Well, we've certainly heard about some of the key success drivers. I know Phil touched on resilience, so I would encourage everyone to download our resilience report, which we published earlier in the year. All our research is available on the AMGC website. We've talked previously about the COVID manufacturer's response portal. So if you are in need of medical PPE or any sort of equipment during the COVID crisis, feel free to get onto our website. That will enable you to be connected to a whole range of manufacturers all across Australia. I certainly encourage you to do that. And again, feel free to reach out to all of us on LinkedIn. I think we've got some slides coming up, and we'll be looking forward to next week's episode. So today we talked about harnessing the power of networks and nurturing those existing networks, but also creating new opportunities. Building new networks by reaching out to other manufacturers. And I touched on Rod Murphy and his company R&R Murphy, which continues to grow right now and employing new people, which I'm very pleased to know about that. So building those new networks, picking up the phone, whether it's a cold call or just touching base with someone in your network, it's important to get on that phone and do that. Contacting research groups, we talked about that because of the universities. There's some outstanding opportunities that we all know about. These are happening. And if you need some assistance, I'm happy to help. Avoid zero-sum thinking. Australian neighbours can lift their international competitiveness of both firms. And register with supply chain portals. With Penny, we talked about ICN. There's also the Centre for Defence Industry Capability, or CDIC. And we know right now that there's Australia's largest budget ever, some $270 billion in the defence sector. So if you think there's an opportunity for your company to get engaged in defence, reach out and we can help you with that. Certainly visiting trade exhibitions, we touched on that. And in the online world that we all have now, we're doing it right at this time, aren't we? We're connecting with each other over Zoom. So trade exhibitions can be virtual, and I'm sure we're all getting involved with those. So do more of it and meet with larger suppliers. It might be the defence primes. As Angela talked about, it could be in the mining, oil and gas sector. Whoever it is, just reach out to those larger manufacturers or larger suppliers in your network and see how you might be able to assist them. And in return, they might have opportunities for your business to grow. And certainly joining industry network groups. I know many of you are out there today, and I touched on some of the networks in Australia, but again, feel free to reach out and I'm happy to connect you to the various industry networking opportunities that exist right across the nation. Now, this one I always rave about because to me, I think social media and websites are so important. So have and maintain a quality website. Companies should ensure their website clearly outlines their capabilities, their products and services, and make sure it's easy to search. Of course, if you can get a cold call going, you want to have a reference point for people to go to after that call. So always encourage people to join the AMGC. It's completely free for you to get involved and become a member. Get onto our Twitter feed and you can keep up with our latest news on LinkedIn or our YouTube channel where these series will be available to you. The Manufacturing Academy, log in and learn. That's a great platform and it's only going to grow. Some great engagement there from manufacturers right across Australia who are sharing their experience about how they're transforming their business today. And I talked just now about the COVID Manufacturer Response Register. It's growing. There's more and more people getting involved with that each and every week. So certainly encourage you if you've got a need for that to get on board. So can I thank all our panel speakers today for joining me. It's great to meet you, Phil. I look forward to hearing more about the AMGC project. And Penny, those boots, I said they're fantastic. I look forward to being in Gunnedah again shortly and getting all the latest news. So thanks for joining us. And Angela, we've got more to go. This is week 4 of the 10 Ways report. And you can see that on the screen there. We've got much more to cover. And we've got a great range of speakers coming up to share all their latest experience with you. So thank you all for joining us and we'll see you next week. All the best.